So we are recording. Okay, it's 8:45 Pacific, so we're going to go ahead and get started on time. Good morning. My name is Pam Egan. I'm with the UC Berkeley Labor Center. I'm the Director of Labor Management Partnerships program there. And just so folks know, we are recording. This is the LIRA Breakout Session 1.2. The title is Amplifying the Voices of Historically Undervalued and Essential Workers. It focuses on the comprehensive and accessible reemployment through equitable employment recovery. That is the career project. And I'd love to invite all of the attendees to put your name and your affiliation in the chat if you'd like. And if you've got a particular question or area of interest related to this panel, you can go ahead and put that in the chat as well. That'll really help our panelists focus their remarks on ways that are most interesting to all of you. So in this morning's panel, we're going to hear from three really amazing, in my view, worker-centered labor management partnerships. And these partnerships are leveraging together $3 million in federal dislocated worker grant funds to build out an infrastructure that includes worker-friendly technology and that connects unemployed workers from marginalized communities to high quality, frontline, and essential jobs. And by high quality, we're primarily focused on better wages, benefits, and career paths. The comprehensive and accessible reemployment through equitable employment recovery career project was built by the Apprenticeship Readiness Fund, affiliated with the Los Angeles and Orange County Building and Construction Trades Council. And that's represented today by Ann McMonigle. It also includes the Hospitality Training Academy, which is affiliated with Unite Here Local 11, and that's represented today by Executive Director Adine Foreman. And it also includes Work Forward, which is affiliated with UFCW Locals 770 and 324. And that's represented today by Workforce Development Advisor, Sarah Miles. And we're going to put the bios of these really experienced practitioners in the LIRA materials so that you can delve into their bios more directly when you at your leisure. Recognizing that these partnerships all served a shared set of communities who've been historically undervalued and excluded from the labor market, Adine, Ann, and Sarah convened the workers, unions, and employers in their partnerships to develop this cross-sector project and to really build a joint infrastructure of worker-informed apprenticeship and apprenticeship readiness, a set of social capital networks, and work-adjacent supports, all of those things with the goal of improving access to higher quality jobs in retail food, in construction, and in hospitality. Now, two of these partnerships, the Hospitality Training Academy and Work Forward, particularly focus on sectors or occupations where workers of color, women, immigrants, and other workers' communities whose work is historically undervalued are significantly overrepresented. And these partnerships build pathways to the best quality jobs in these sectors. That is, jobs where job quality is the highest in the sector because workers exert their voice and power through collective bargaining relationships. And the third partnership, the Apprenticeship Readiness Fund, focuses on removing barriers and increasing access for these same communities to, again, high quality construction apprenticeships, once again connecting workers to the best quality jobs in the sector. Workers from these communities power and inform the career project's work to advance undervalued and marginalized workers, both individually and importantly also collectively. Okay. Members of these affected communities and incumbent workers from each of the sectors inform the development, the design, the implementation, and the evaluation of the program. So the model uses the wisdom of worker educators to provide practical skills training, mentoring, and industry-wide problem solving. The infrastructure connects workers to networks of unions, community organizations, and employers to increase workers' individual and, importantly, collective social capital. So we're going to hear directly from these folks about how they did this and what's key to being able to replicate this work. So let's start with Anne McMonigal, Executive Director of the Apprenticeship Readiness Fund. And Anne, would you tell us a little bit about your partnership and its role in the Career Project?
Pam, I'm getting a message from Anne that she may be having technical difficulties, so maybe jump ahead to Adine.
That sounds great. Thanks, Anne, and we hope to hear from you in a little bit. Adine, let's go ahead then and start with you. Adine Foreman, Executive Director of the Hospitality Training Academy, and really one of the key drivers behind the Career Project.
So let me see if I can get her video on so that people can get a little sense of Unite Here Local 11 and our training program. So Pam, am I ready to go with a share screen? Pam?
Yep, you are. You can
Okay.
share your screen.
Okay,
There
let's see
we
if
go.
this is it. Okay, good. Okay, if there's any problems, I'm going to do it from the internet. If not, I can do it from the download.
Hey, Adine, I'm not hearing audio. Thanks, folks, for your technical patience.
When you share, you have to click a button, I think, on the bottom left to include audio.
Okay, bottom left.
I think.
I have it. Okay, so let me take out the headphones and let me see if I can do it that way. And we'll try it one more time. I thought we had this all perfect. Okay, let's try this again. Uh-oh. Okay, this is gonna. Pam, what should I do?
Sorry, everyone. It's just tons of technical difficulties for our panel this morning.
Are you back?
There's Anne.
I am back. I'm on my phone.
Why don't we let Anne go and then I'll get the video going.
That sounds great, Adine.
Okay,
And
my apologies, everyone. Where I am is terribly windy, so on my phone seems to be the safest way to Zoom. My name is Anne McMonigal. I am the Executive Director of the Apprenticeship Readiness Fund. We are a nonprofit of the LA Orange County Building and Construction Trades Council. Our sole and primary mission is to help support and train individuals in the National Building Trades curriculum, the multi-craft core curriculum. It is an apprenticeship readiness tool, which is our new wording for pre-apprenticeship. We don't use the word pre-apprenticeship because it is not a direct to placement. You still have to qualify and apply to get into the trades yourself. So we utilize this national curriculum that was created by all of the signatory trades at the National Building Trades. It's an orientation into the industry, and then it is a pathway into the 27 apprenticeship programs that are affiliated with our council. We work to provide this training for free for individuals from disadvantaged communities. And then our placement tool for them is to drive the demand side through project labor agreements and the community benefits agreements that are in those PLAs that then will trigger the number of new apprentices that can go to work on a project. And then once they are indentured, they'll be in the trades as long as they hustle and choose to. So we have 17 programs throughout our region. We are at 17% training and placement and graduating of women, which is the largest in the country. And unfortunately, because we are a new nonprofit founded in 2017, we haven't had the resources to really focus on it in a way that we are doing so now. And we look to be launching a recruitment outreach campaign right now. We're working with a strategy firm to help us around messaging, so that we know who should deliver the message, what the message should be, and how it should be delivered to new generations of women in the trades, to recruit the next generation of women in the trades. We are at 93% people of color, and we have to date placed and helped place 1,100 individuals into registered union apprenticeship programs. So we work with community-based organizations, and we work with community colleges and the public workforce system to help build this partnership that creates a pathway into the union construction trades. We are affiliated with the Building Trades Council, and we only train for union construction because obviously we believe that that is the high road, and that's our road. So we have lots of work going on. We have billions of dollars in project labor agreements. Really looking forward to the material shortage lifting so that we can start to place more individuals into the trade. So we work as a collaboration, which can be shocking if you come from the labor world, to know that our labor management partnerships, we're all friends when it comes to workforce development, which I unabashedly see as an organizing tool for organized labor and to create the next generation of union workers.
That's extraordinary, Anne. Thanks for that overview. Really particularly helpful, and points to a lot of things that I think we'll talk about when we get to question and answer and discussion. So thank you very much. Let's go ahead then and move to Aideen Foreman. And Aideen, can you give us an overview of HTA? And I think you're going to try to share with us a video that brings worker and instructor voices.
I looked for Joel's tip on the share sound, which is not on my anywhere on the bottom of my screen. So I'm going to try this one more time. You'll tell me if this is working, and let's see how this goes. Okay, Pam, you can see it, right?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm putting up the sound on this. I mean, sound is here. Can you hear it?
I went to prison, and
Yes.
when I found this AJCC program that has a program that's called Prison to Employment. And through them, they connected me with HTA. When I was first told that I was accepted to the program, I was very excited because I had built up all this energy from taking the Zoom classes, and now I knew it was going to be hands-on.
This program has changed my life in a very drastic way because, as we know, taking these courses in any college is expensive, and to know that the fact that you don't have to pay for it here, it's amazing.
I've learned a lot in this culinary school. I just love the fact that the chefs are so hands-on and how much experience that they come with. And I really love the fact how HTA provides the genuineness in it. You really feel like you have a family.
We're here to make a difference with these students and how we're going to change them from not knowing what they wanted or unsure about their culinary abilities to confident, really good prep cooks and line cooks. In fact, we'll almost guarantee that any of our members here will leave and become a very good employee.
This program changed my life with my family. It changed my life personally. A better cook, a better father, I think, and teaching my kid that I'm going to school and it's a good thing to go to school. So if he goes to school and gives it 100% every day, just like Daddy does.
It's not just about cooking. It's a method to the madness here. It's math that goes with cooking. It's prep. It's time management. It's a lot that go along with cooking. It ain't just putting pot on the stove.
I wanted to become a cook because I've always been surrounded by the kitchen. My dad was a cook. He's currently a cook at where I'm working as a steward at Berkeley. And before him, his mom was a cook in a little restaurant in Mexico, and his uncle was a cook at the same hotel. Thankfully, with the experience I gained here, I'm going to try to become a cook at Berkeley. So I want to move into that since it's kind of been a rite of passage for my family. One of the biggest things I've learned from here is It is technical, but it is the math, all the different aspects that cooking takes, being fast, having that sense of urgency, get it done, but also be right on with the recipes.
If you ever have the opportunity to do this program, it is a phenomenal program that will help you succeed in life, give you your everyday tools. It's like they see your flaws, but at the same time, they help you succeed. They want you to succeed, and they're not going to set you up for failure.
It's really hard to find somebody that you look at and you actually agree that they care about what you're doing. And I'm really sell them on that sincerity. I just naturally let them know I care about how it's going to come out and how you do it to make it come out.
I think what HTA and Chef Danny has provided us is a very soft bed to land on when we fall down or when we make mistakes. A place for us to not be too scared to try to mess it up.
I have a union job now at the Sheraton Universal, and I'm really excited for this phase of my life.
Thanks to HCA, I got into the proper hotel in Santa Monica. It took the best of me to get hired there. They are a very prestigious company. They are looking for the best of the best, and HTA got me there.
Okay, Pam, can you hear me? Okay,
Yep.
so thank you for that tip. I think we got that working. Okay, so I'm Egan Foreman. I'm the executive director of the Hospitality Training Academy, and we are the training arm of Unite Here Local 11 and their contributing employers. Local 11 has 32,500 members. We cover Southern California, which is LA, Orange County, and the Inland Empire, along with the entire state of Arizona. So we have a nice swath of territory that we're trying to get trained up, especially during this post-pandemic recovery. On top of it, we're working with other cities throughout the country to try and really help them to the extent they want to be helped, develop programs as well. It's our goal to make sure that anybody who wants to take advantage of these types of intense training programs has the opportunity to do it. And I can go 15 different ways on this talk. So if anybody wants to, throw up questions in the chat, I can certainly try and move around or do questions at the end. But really, it's our desire to partner, as Sam said, not Pam, as Anne said, but I need more coffee this morning, as Anne said, to really make an ecosystem in California that is really a labor management partnership world where we are doing the best training we can, and that we have places to refer people that are sent to us and to assist their whole family. So if I have a room attendant whose husband wants to be a welder, I know that I can send him to Anne's program. If I have somebody in our program that wants to be a deli cook, we're working with UFCW to train them up. And we're hoping UFCW soon gets their meat apprenticeship program that Sarah will talk about up and running so that they can take advantage of some of the best jobs in the grocery industry. It's really our desire to do the heavy lifting that we, unfortunately, and I say this after years and years of experience with the WIOA system, for those of you that have worked in workforce, that our partners in the one-stop world have not done, which is the heavy lifting. We see in this AJC world that people who are looking for jobs, those workforce centers want to take the easy route, help the accountants, help the people that don't have any barriers get those jobs, and then they view any job as a good job. We don't take that view, right? We take the view that we have to dig deep into our communities. We are partnered with, as those of you who know Unite Here, Local 11, it is incredibly progressive. Sometimes I even use the word militant at times about their values. And so we want to dig into homeless populations, into reentry, into transgender and foster youth and marginalized vulnerable communities, especially in Los Angeles, like South Central African American populations. Dig deep into those communities, find those folks, do what it takes to get them the workforce training and the skills training and the soft skills they need to move into those good quality union jobs. So many of the people that we place or that we train and place, I should say, are coming out of communities where they've never even been in an airport before. They've never been on a plane. We're exposing them to a whole world of good union jobs with benefits, with worker voice and a career ladder, which in California, thanks to Deputy Secretary Julie Su, is really a product of a program she developed here called the High Road Training Partnerships. But really, it's all about good quality jobs. And that's what we fight for every day. We fight to make sure that people who don't have a leg or a way into the system get that through us, through our training program at the highest level possible. We partner with the Four Seasons and the Fairmont and Hilton and Hyatt and Marriott and all of those hotel chains to provide the training, not at a lower level, but all of our training is at that level. So folks get into a job and maybe they're overtrained for that job, but we know that puts them on a good career pathway. So that's really our program in a nutshell. It's really about trying to work with our employers to make sure that these folks are not just somebody who wants to be a Hollywood actor, but is doing hospitality in the meantime to make a good buck, but somebody who's really invested in the hospitality industry as a career. And it's our effort and working with the union to make sure these folks get everything we can to make sure they're successful and that their lives eventually are hopefully changed for the better. And they're really on the road to self-sufficiency in the middle class. That's how we really view the industry. And we view it as the more partners we have, so that the more they can refer their friends, their relatives, their neighbors to all of our different programs in our little ecosystem in Los Angeles, the better off we're going to make that family. And the more we're going to be able to lift them out of homelessness, out of housing projects, whatever we can, that's what we're here to do. So Pam, I think that's sort of a quick nutshell on the hospitality industry.
That's fantastic, Aideen. You all are doing and continue to do extraordinary work in that sector in your region. Thank you. So, absolutely. So let's move to Sarah Miles, Workforce Development Advisor for United Food and Commercial Workers Work Forward. Sarah, take it away.
Absolutely. As Pam said, my name is Sarah Miles. I'm a Workforce Development Advisor for United Food and Commercial Workers, Western States Council, and States Council is the coordinating body of 11 local unions of UFCW within California, Arizona, and Nevada. And so my task, we're not new to workforce, we've just shelved it over the years. And so my task was to come on board and figure out an infrastructure design to be able to create a lasting workforce system for our locals. So we've long had a meat cutter apprenticeship program in the grocery stores for decades. I mean, the standards, the original standards are, you know, in a file cabinet somewhere. It's so old. And as often happens with training programs or other, you know, organically developed systems, people retire and trainings go away. And that is what happened to the meat cutter apprenticeship program in Southern California. So our effort on this DOL career grant with Aideen and Ann and their organizations is to rebuild that meat cutter apprenticeship in the grocery stores down south, and rely on our Northern California meat apprenticeship program to inform the curriculum content, the subject matter expertise. But my task and the task of the work within this grant collective is to, as I said, build that infrastructure and also really lean on Aideen and Ann, who have both greater experience building out workforce training, but also really understand LA, so we can tailor it to the region. A lot of the concentration naturally for us is in California. We represent 180,000 workers in California, largely about 70% in retail grocery and retail environments as well, including retail pharmacy. But we also have food and beverage processing plants and agriculture. So we're looking at how to build this out and then reflect on how it can be utilized for other industries and then other regions as well. So that's the critical importance for us on this, is just being a baby organization, learning how to do it right. And I want to stress two things that Secretary Walsh said this morning in the plenary, that labor unions think about their members. and first and foremost, all day, every day. And you can see that with Adine and Anne's discussions. And a way that I'm helping to look at this from the workforce side to build this into the funding infrastructure, into the community infrastructure, is UFCW represents in California 180,000 jobs, because immediately that piques the interest of the local workforce boards and the community groups, because it's not just the member side. This is really a core infrastructure for job development, both for incumbent workers and potentially for future workers within our organizations, represented by our organizations. I think Adine, when I'm done, if you could talk a bit about the limitations, like with Taft-Hartley and the constraints that labor has with this, which is, I think, led to a lot of the hard relationships between us and one-stops and other entities. So that's really what we're doing, is looking at what we can do, what's the right way to build it out for sustainability so it could survive retirements in the future. And it's not built around singular people. And like, for example, that's why working with Anne is really important. We're a strange organization. We're not like Adine's organization. We're not like Anne's organization. We're like a hybrid of the two. And so it's, how do you build that? How do you, train your apprentices and then train them to become instructors so that you just don't have a gray tsunami and then suddenly your program falters? And how do you build out a workforce program, bringing people into learning how to do workforce? It's hard, it's kind of tedious, we're nerds. It's hard to break in, and it's hard. There's a lot of moving pieces and it's hard to learn it. So one of the other things that I'm doing, not part of this grant, but generally, is building a workforce infrastructure across my 9 locals in California so that they can develop these relationships and model what I'm doing with Anne and Adine for their region, for their members, for the industries they represent, and for their local governments. Ultimately, yes, it's an incredible organizing tool, but it's also a mission. And in terms of the interests of local governments, state government, federal government, we're going to make good taxpayers, so then we can build more. And so that's a really important key. I stole that from the community college mission, but it's true. We're doing that too. We're having a very strong, hands-on, results-oriented training programs that benefit people and their families, but also benefit the communities and the economic infrastructure of that region.
That's extraordinary, Sarah. Thank you. And you always approach from my experience, you always approach your work very strategically. And so connecting with Adine and Anne to continue to create this infrastructure that everybody's mentioned is really critical.
Yeah, and I just want to jump back real quick. I left out one of the things that Secretary Walsh said, and that's, traditionally labor and capitalism is an adversarial relationship. It doesn't have to be that way across the board. Workforce training is an easy get along opportunity, and it's sustaining it through high road training funding and the development of labor management training partnerships is part of that critical sustainability infrastructure. Everybody buys in, and the funding exists not only from outside, which I'm relying on right now, but we'll be turning that into the employers also funding that training, because employers should invest in their workers. And that's a culture that's, largely fallen out of practice. My dad tells a story of when he graduated from college, his first job was in an escrow firm. And he had 6 months of training provided by his employer before he could individually handle any escrow documents. And that doesn't exist anywhere. People are expected to come in across all levels and know how to use equipment, know how to understand the culture of a company. Onboarding is a word, it's not a practice. And so building these training partnerships, these fundamental programs like Adine's and Anne's and Future Mind will help resolve that connection, because the managers, the employers are part of it.
Terrific. And thanks for tying it back to Secretary Walsh's remarks this morning. That's really helpful as well to give us this frame. So I'm going to invite the participants or the audience to sort of put questions in the chat if you'd like, or put the word stack in the chat if you'd like to ask your question directly, and we'll start calling on folks. And while you're thinking about your questions and getting in the chat, let me start with a question, if I may. So I heard all of you talk about this infrastructure, and I think Aideen, you mentioned a web or a broad infrastructure, particularly in Los Angeles. Really helpful, because if you start to think about it, you're connecting some pretty solid infrastructures that you've built over many years or are continuing to build and revive, connecting them to union infrastructure with project labor agreements and community benefits agreements, connecting them to workforce development infrastructure, both public and private, connecting across states, connecting across regions. That becomes a pretty huge infrastructure that supports and is informed by and has control and power located in the very workers that you all serve. Sounds like a lot of work and some challenges maybe went into that. Can you touch a little bit on what some of those challenges are in connecting that kind of infrastructure across sectors?
The hardest thing that we operate within is not only are we a Taft-Hartley fund, right, which has to follow all of the ERISA rules, right? We are a workforce organization that is getting, WIOA federal government funding, and making sure that everything we do, we live in a land where we want to be as transparent as possible with where those dollars go, what we fund, all of that. And so I think the hard part is making sure, when you get WIOA dollars, right, you have to have program manuals and fiscal manuals and employee manuals and procedures where if the clients aren't happy, there's grievance procedures and all of these kind of things. We operate two Department of Labor registered apprenticeship programs and State of California registered apprenticeship programs, and we have one more coming down the pike. So it's just we are trying to always make sure we have our case notes. We use Salesforce. Everything is documented. Everything is fiscally, we are sound across the board on every type of, which way we can spend the money. So I think constantly making sure that, we are doing what we're supposed to handle these programs appropriately. I think last year our budget was about 30 million. So we make sure that we do single audits, that we're doing everything we can to make sure we have the infrastructure in LA and the tools we need to get through those different processes and audits so that we can share those with our partners and they also can be successful. It's always about, for us, making sure there's no findings, making sure we're doing everything right, being very clear when we get grants, okay, what's eligibility, making sure that what we view eligibility is what they view eligibility is, right? There's all of that work that needs to happen that I think unions think about in their world of doing organizing, but unions don't have workforce people. And trying to get the unions to understand our workforce world, getting employers to understand our workforce world, that when somebody gets hired, they're going to need to show us proof of a paycheck. There's all of these things we have to do and have in the system to validate our programs. And that's what I would sort of say. And then Pam, Joel has a question. So I want to make sure.
Oh, I just want to piggyback on what Aideen was saying. That I think the hardest thing about building that infrastructure is that the system is not set us for us to join and to win in it. Again, labor does not really have we are the three workforce people for labor in California for the most part, and we lean on each other to build our structure. But, we are working, it's the same kind of concept where we're program people. We knew it was a good idea. We want to invest in the community. We want to invest in our future workforce. But now we are working with lawyers to make sure we have our Department of Labor procedures and everything down so that when we do trigger an audit, which we likely will this year with the amount of funding coming through, that we will be ready to pass it with flying colors. And that just isn't a structure. I mean, the first time I heard single audit was earlier this year. So it's not even something that programs like ours are aware of, because we are just trying to get out there and help people get into good union jobs. But so I would just say that, you know, these large bureaucracies have set up the policies and the procedures, and not being a bureaucracy is a hill we have to climb.
And I'm going to jump on real quick before we let Joel ask his question. A lot of WIOA and federal policy excludes us explicitly the way we think about ourselves. And I think that that's what Anne was saying as well. But so there's not only the barriers of explaining who we are to entities that, you know, funding entities, it's explaining who the funding entities are to our unions. And so it's that's the three of us working together and leaning on each other and watching each other make and correct mistakes and avoid mistakes and just troubleshoot. And we have a lot of offline conversations of, hey, I'm in traffic and I have this thought. Is this legal? Who should I ask? And just those basic water cooler type conversations make this possible. And it makes an opportunity to grow this elsewhere as well.
Great lessons about both in the amount of investment that's really required in just managing this kind of work, and then the partnership between workers in the intermediaries themselves, yourselves, to be able to support each other and share learnings. Really helpful. So Joel, we are going to open up to your question.
So I have a question that keys right off of what you were just talking about. It deals with negotiations, and I'll get to that in a minute, but let me frame it in the following way. You're all describing what we call boundary spanning roles, where you have to link the workers that you're training with policymakers, with employers, with training providers, with, you know, any number of other folks. And this is a particular interest of mine. I've been involved for many years in trying to transform collective bargaining into a more problem-solving kind of approach to negotiations. And I wonder if you could just describe the way in which you conduct the various kinds of negotiations that you conduct. That whether it's with employers, whether it's with policymakers, whether it's in the face of an audit or whatever, would you describe it as more positional, like traditional collective bargaining that you do, or more problem solving? That, you know, if you look at the process by which you accomplish what you do, what can we learn from that?
If you guys don't mind, I'll go first. I think that the answer is going to be the three of us have very different experiences, but, you know, industry and development of our programs. I can speak to the recent negotiations for grocery workers, for grocery contracts in California. And, you know, an industry that really took COVID on the chin. People still went to work. The health and safety crisis that they're still dealing with. And we, our negotiating team had a really hard time in several of the contracts getting any health and safety training language in the contract. And so, but because of the work that I've done, and I've only been with them for a couple of years, so, you know, we're really at the beginning baby stages of it. My team at the negotiating table have the language now to push for things, and they have a picture of where they want to go and some tools on how to get there. So they were able to get in the pieces they could get in. Granted, healthcare access and funding and wages is of course the priority, but they were able to get some pieces in. But they've also identified, okay, well, we couldn't get the employers to agree to this. So Sarah, go figure out how to get our members this. And that's part of that infrastructure development. So it's in terms of the traditional labor management negotiations, it's opened up the eyes of our leadership in terms of like, okay, well, what's possible? If we can't get it from them, we can build it out here and then build it great enough and strong enough that we can come back in 3 years to the next round and make sure that the system that exists can be worded, identified, and incorporated into future contracts.
So you're describing two arenas, the collective bargaining arena and the internal negotiations, which of course is crucial. And of course, there are other arenas as well, but that's helpful because what it sounds like is that knowing what you know makes it at least possible to raise the issues in a meaningful and substantive way, but it's still a heavy lift.
It's still a heavy lift, but we have a ramp. We're building the ramp to throw a metaphor at everyone.
And I would say from our perspective, we're different. We are not a Taft-Hartley fund because we are the pre-apprenticeship. We're the pre-program to the Taft-Hartley funds that exist within registered apprenticeship. However, we have become a tool for bargaining project labor agreements and setting policy around that, in terms of saying, if you are going to go for these large level public investment infrastructure projects, you have to have a pathway for disadvantaged communities into those pathways. And then our legislative side of the house for the building trades then argues that our curriculum, the MC3 curriculum, is the only valid curriculum. And so they've actually been able to write it into state statutes that trigger different projects. So we have one around the SB1 transportation initiative. They've pushed for it. They'd started the first place that we did that in California was on high-speed rail. And now there are even talks up at that national level. Biden said that he's, any of the infrastructure projects that are going to be over $25 million are going to trigger prevailing wage. And because, at least in this state, we are the vast majority of that, it will mean that this will be another tool to get more work. And from a workforce perspective, it's great because we're able to create demand for our supply. But we're kind of going back and forth in that world. It also creates situations within the building trades where there isn't capacity, they don't do workforce development, but now certain counties and more rural areas without the density who haven't had to take this on now have to take this on with a team that was already really lean. So it's helping to try and really kind of be the go-between. I've become the de facto workforce development expert for the building trades, both statewide and nationally, to help them do the dance between what workforce will require, what the grants will mandate, and how to leverage it for the demand. And so we're constantly learning things by doing things that are making the system have to change, because for us, what the system is built on is, an employer having 30 people trained to build widgets. And then if they all build widgets, they get placed right away. That's not how that's not how our apprenticeship programs operate. You have testing times and intake times. And so there's no instant gratification on the placement end, which the system is always putting pressure on. So it's constantly kind of going back and forth and explaining that the benefit is still to change it because this is the right thing to do, but it's because it's been untried, it's constantly trying to figure out that dance.
And just to stay with that for a minute, when you're working in the policy arena around a project labor agreement, how would you describe that kind of bargaining process in terms of what works well, what doesn't?
When we're in that arena, it's always the fight against, the evil empire that is, the ABC for us, right? So they will always come forward and say that they can do it too. And but what we've been able to do, because on the workforce end, we are required to collect data and long-term data, I can actually show how I've moved somebody from being classified as homeless to their third-year apprenticeship and what that economic gain means. So when we are arguing for that policy, and the evildoers will argue that they have apprenticeship programs as well, what we will ask them to do is we will talk about our journeying out rates and so forth. And they don't have journeying out rates because they only go for first years and then they drop them after a prevailing wage project. So, utilizing data as a tool that we started really collecting based on the need for the system to have that has helped us to do that level of negotiation. And we have the numbers. So.
Cool.
Super, super helpful. I'd like to, since we've got a little more than just barely 15 minutes left, I'd love to jump to Barbara Dyer's question, tied to what you all spoke about a little bit ago. If you could all imagine a Department of Labor or a workforce development system, maybe that's more of an enabler than an enforcer, what would need to change? What specific approaches from Fed and state government could enable greater success? How should it look?
So, I mean, I think, listen, Department of Labor has so many prongs to it, right? So we do like that enforcement mechanism, right? To make sure that we have good employers that are doing the good work. But I would say that the thing that we are trying to push is, along with, I think, people like Julie Sue who have seen it work in California, is the good jobs, is the quality jobs, is, I've referenced it already. In California, it's called the High Road Training Partnerships, but it's really moving away from just getting people into a crappy job that goes nowhere, that doesn't pay well, with no benefits, no career ladder, but really looking at investing in those good jobs. And those are, for the most part, they're good union jobs, right? So I think it's working not just to build up and continue to buck up a system that sometimes doesn't work, that American Job Center system, but to look at bringing in more labor management partnerships, more best practices nationally that are doing the hard work, particularly, as I said before, with those vulnerable populations, that reentry, that homeless, and figure out funding pots that can help us scale nationally, funding pots that can help us move that agenda and help us really spread this program. The problem is you can't really have labor management partnerships without unions. And then, there's a lot of places where, especially in the South, for example, there's not a lot of unions. So it's just that unions don't have that density. So it's kind of hard to scale this program where there's no unions to partner with. But, I think we're getting there. I think Marty Walsh is a giant change from what we had in the Trump administration. And we are really, I think, lucky to have him and Julie Sue and that team there that understands what we're doing and understands labor management partnerships.
I'm going to echo Dean on the High Road Training Partnership side. So in California, the High Road Training Partnership projects, they do two really important things. They first and foremost elevate worker voice. That has to be a central component to any efforts that get funded. And secondly, you're allowed to use resources to build an organization, which I find incredibly useful right now as I'm building an organization. There's really no way UFCW, we run so lean, we are constantly having to be reactive to economic changes, public health and safety changes, and there really hasn't been an effort to be able to build out workforce because there was no designated resource. And so the state of California has really invested in this. And in terms of what I'd like to see from the Department of Labor, I would love to see that, even some pilot funding in other parts of the state. It's going to be tragic when California has just robust high road training partnership, worker voice, people who are empowered to do their jobs, do them well, earn living wages, and it's really just concentrated in California. So I think if the Department of Labor, if I could wave my wand, they would really look to see what California is doing. They've brought in Julie Sue, who was our labor secretary in California, to be the undersecretary at DOL. So that's a first huge step, but really open that up. And then the second, of course, Barbara, is the typical bureaucracy stuff. I'm still waiting on my SAM number so that I can invoice saving. So just, the usual complaints, but also just that heavy lift of thinking about how to raise workers, because workers are the base of the economy. And if we treat them like hire and fire, then that's what we're going to get. And that's what we've had. And it's clearly not working. A huge portion of our membership who work in grocery stores get their food from food closets because of the cost of food going up and the low wages. We had to fight tooth and nail to get Kroger to go above the 60-cent an hour raise that they offered. That's embarrassing. After they earned so much during the pandemic, that's what they brought to the table. And so really just investing in a high road training partnership, investing in the workforce, and incorporating that worker voice into the work we do is critical.
Yeah,
but also
and I would, and to piggyback on that, first what Sarah said about, California, Egan and I were at the National Association of Workforce Boards at one particular session where a gentleman from Wisconsin stood up and said, there's so much economic inequality and racial disparity in registered apprenticeship. And we were like, that Scott Walker did that to you, because where we are, that is equity. We only, in construction in California, if you're a fourth period iron worker, you make a fourth period iron worker's wage, and it doesn't matter who you are, what your background was, except for the fact that you are training, working hard, and are a fourth period iron worker. So, there's a lot of disparity in other states that became right to work states that don't have that, that don't have labor to be there to argue for that. But really, the second thing, what I really think the Department of Labor could do is I attended a National Association of Job Administrators conference, which I personally referred to as the Scared Straight Fiscal Edition conference, because I am a program person. I am not a finance person, but to have a bunch of auditors tell me, like, whoa, like I could be doing so much more with the funding we're receiving if I wasn't so scared of the monitoring. And that's good. And don't get me wrong, as a labor person, monitoring, and compliance, monitoring, and making sure people are doing the right thing is not something we ever want to take away, but helping to do more technical assistance for entities like us to say, hey, let me walk you through how to fill this out. Let me walk you through, here are sample, supportive services definitions. Here's a sample procurement process. Just something as in terms of like a toolkit that would help us to be able to create that infrastructure that, we just, it's helping us do the right thing, because program wise, we know how to do the right thing and we are invested in it from our hearts and our boots. But it's the what we don't know that could hurt us. And because we, again, are not these workforce boards or community colleges that have entire departments dedicated to this, we don't have that. So having that level of tool, like a toolkit, sample policies, sample things, so that programs do not end up falling into any kind of a trap, would be very helpful. And then again, to piggyback on what Egan was saying, language and the wording that we use really matters. So high road is now being talked about a lot, but it needs to be the definition that needs to be talked about. That means focusing on equity and workers' voice and pathways into the middle class and steps for people to climb up that career ladder, and that there is an investment in that between workers and employers, and that we talk about what it means, not just using it as a buzzword in the way that people have tried to water down registered apprenticeship by saying, oh, this is an apprenticeship, but it certainly doesn't meet the definition because apprenticeship became kind of a buzzword. And so what we're really hoping is that the focus stays on the fact that high road employers, by definition, invest in their workers, and that there is a pathway for people to move up. And that when we are using these definitions, that they're the right thing. And that also, on that mind, it's constantly like the language that we're using in our pieces. When we're talking about high road training, we do not, in the labor movement, say there is a worker shortage, because there isn't a worker shortage. There is a shortage of quality employers who want to pay their workers a living wage to do their work. It's not that you can't get people who can do the work. It's that people are done and saying, I'm not going to do that post this pandemic, post everything that's been going on around me. I'm not going to do that and take this level of disrespect anymore. And I think that's wonderful. I think this is a great time to get in there and say, yes, let's invest in people. I don't know why we aren't talking about the economic benefits to retention. There are, it's kind of taking the time now to change the language, I think could really, really help be supportive.
Well, look what's going on with Amazon and Starbucks, right? I mean, we're seeing people like saying, we're not just going to stay in these crappy jobs. We're going to fight for them to be better jobs.
So we're hearing long-term investment because shifting, major economic shifts take time. Investment in the technical infrastructure that's necessary to manage major programs with public dollars, but also a focus and maybe measurement, would you say, on the things that really matter? So measuring worker voice and worker power in the system, where that comes from, measuring retention, measuring the economic value to all of those things. Those are, and flexibility, right? A reopening of our thinking about how projects and programs are structured to actually achieve and measure the goals of equity. We often also have goals of climate resilience and then job quality. Is that fair to say? Fair to say we can't have equity without job quality because there aren't enough, I think Egan, you pointed out, there aren't enough quality jobs so that everybody has a shot at economic success, right? So we've got to figure out ways for the system to impact job quality
Pam,
as we move toward.
Can I chime in? I asked the
Please.
question, and I really loved the answers and your framing, tying it together. It sounds to me like an overall shift in the structure of incentives from numbers of jobs to quality jobs means looking differently at how funding is distributed, how monitoring occurs. If we were to add a layer of measurement on top of what we already measure without fundamentally shifting all of that, it would just be even more onerous than it is now. So it's just stepping back, I think, to see how is this incentive structure currently reinforcing something else, and what would need to shift on all of these dimensions in order for us to reinforce at the government level what others are trying to achieve on the ground to improve the quality of work and quality of jobs. Thank you for asking my question. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Panelists, that Barbara's framing really resonates with me. Does that resonate with all of you, what you were saying?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So we've got about 3 minutes left to stay on time. We have a note from Allison recommending that folks attend a panel on Saturday, broadening the definition of job quality and work scheduling quality. That sounds really apropos of the conversation we just had. Any last minute questions or comments that folks want to share in our last 3 minutes?
I would just say something to Allison. The issue that we have, right? We're a labor management partnership with a board that's half union, half management, right? So we're really not a labor entity. We're really this hybrid, right? And I like to view us as sort of Switzerland. So I think, Allison, the problem comes for us when we deal with seniority and scheduling, right? That is the ultimate problem with new workers and in the union world, because you have new workers where you want to get them a great job. I'm just going to pick let's say a 5-star luxury hotel where I've got somebody who's just fresh out of my apprenticeship program as a cook, right? They're going to go to a 5-star luxury hotel, but they're at the bottom of seniority, which means that they work when there's work, right? If the hotel is busy for a conference, that's great. You're getting 40 hours a week, maybe overtime. But if the hotel is really slow, like let's say it's during its slow season, they might only get, because they're so low in seniority, 8 hours, 16 hours. So that becomes the issue we see in the whole scheduling world, right? That conflict between seniority. And so what we do is we wound up getting them really a second job to make sure that they have enough hours to make a living. They got to pay their rent, they got to do that. But that's really in your world where we want these folks to be able to see their kids if they have custody on the weekends. But yet if they're in a union job and there's an event and they're at the bottom of seniority, they got to work on Saturday. It's no ifs, ands, or buts. Hospitality is 24/7, 365, just like healthcare. So it's an interesting world we live in on that issue, I would say, at least in Unite here.
So great. Job quality work abounds at all levels and in all circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, Anna's lucky in her way because she doesn't have seniority in the building trades, right? If they like the worker, then that worker gets invited back and gets more gigs. We don't quite operate that way.
But Aideen's workaround of being basically like a referral entity within HTA to make sure that people earn those hours, while it might not be ideal, certainly for the headache and the stress of the workers and for HTA, is something that UFCW is looking at in terms of how could we build out something similar or appropriate for our members and employer partners.
But you're still paying to that pension fund every hour you work.
Yep.
And the one final thing I'll point out is that because you all have this infrastructure, you are a place where problems like that can be surfaced from the worker's perspective. Here's what it means for a real person in the real world, surfaced and then addressed, because you've got a problem-solving mechanism that centers workers and puts workers' power and voice at the center. So you're going to be able to solve those problems because you're the only ones that are in a position to solve those problems because you've got the right folks at the table.
And to be clear, we really talk about them. We use the worker's name and we say, okay, so, Alejandra has this issue and this is what we're working on. And we're trying to help resolve their earning issues. Yeah. So it's really a collective effort.
Yeah. Well, I know we could continue to talk. There's so much to be said, but thank you all for your terrific participation. Thanks to our panelists. You keep doing what you're doing and teach us more about it. And we'll see each other at other panels, I think, in this conference.
And thanks to Pam.
Great. Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.